$290 emergency, a $6,900 debt sentence, a phone call that finally gets a father to say where his will is. 3 moments, one person, 6 months. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly which of your numbers is quietly working for you, and which one is quietly working against you. Most people never find out until it's expensive. Here's where it starts. You've heard it your whole working life. Work more, make more. So you take the extra closing shift again, 4th time this month. Same $21 an hour. Same ache in your feet by midnight. Nobody tells you about the other number, the one that isn't tied to your hours at all. It's sitting in an app on your phone right now, barely touched, quietly outperforming the shift you just finished. Back at the warehouse the next morning, your coworker Priya turns her phone around at lunch to show you the new Jeep Wrangler she just picked up. $612 a month, 39 months, 0 down. "I've wanted one since college," she says. You nod, because you know exactly what a sentence like that costs to say, and what it actually costs to mean. You make $54,000 a year. Priya makes almost the same. Same shifts, same lunchroom, same 2.5% raise every spring. And yet somehow her Jeep in the parking lot makes it look like she's winning. You open your banking app at your desk that afternoon. This time you don't close it after checking your balance. You scroll. Checking.
Wow.
$612.
That's sharp.
$290. A 401k you started 14 months ago, matched 3% by the company. $1,740. Nothing else. No Roth, no brokerage account, nothing. You add it up twice, once wrong, once right, and land on just under $2,650. That number feels different from your paycheck. Your paycheck passes through you. It lands, it leaves, it becomes rent and gas and the groceries you already forgot you bought. This number is what's left standing after everything else takes its cut. You think about Priya's Jeep again, except with different math running underneath it. Her payment is $612 a month for something worth less the moment she drives it off the lot. Your 401k contribution is $135 a month, automatic, boring, invisible, and it's the only bill you pay that makes you wealthier instead of poorer for paying it. Nobody parks a retirement statement in the break room. Nobody screenshots a 401k balance for their story. But one of those numbers compounds, and the other one depreciates the second it clears the lot. The 2026 contribution limit on your plan is $24,500. You're not close. But scrolling the plan details that night, you learn the combined limit between what you put in and what your employer matches tops out near $72,000. You're not maxing anything. You're barely in the game. But for the first time, being in the game feels like the whole point, and the Jeep starts to look like a costume. Driving your 2018 Corolla home that night, 104,000 miles, the check engine light you've been pretending not to see since spring, you don't feel behind anymore. You feel like you finally know what's actually being measured. It was never the car in the lot. It was never the number that lands and disappears by the 12th. It's the number that stays, which is a problem because right now most of what stays isn't growing. Something else is eating it alive. The email is still sitting there, subject line fading gray with age. You finally open it on a Sunday night, laptop on your knees, cold leftovers beside you. Capital One balance, $5,240. A PR, 26.49%. Minimum due, $131. You know exactly how you built this number. A security deposit you didn't have cash for, an ER visit in January, a flight home for your brother's wedding that felt like the only option at the time. None of it felt reckless when it happened. It felt like living. Your neighbor Marcus, who bartends 4 nights a week, told you once he just pays the minimum and doesn't think about it. "It's like $130 a month, it's nothing," he said, leaning on his door frame. You nodded then. Tonight, on the couch, you actually run the math he never did. At 26.49%, paying only the $131 minimum, that $5,240 balance takes more than 11 years to clear. You'll pay over $6,100 in interest, more than the debt itself, for the privilege of not thinking about it. You think about the $135 a month quietly compounding in the 401k. This card is the same machine running backward, same daily math, same relentless compounding, except instead of building something, it's dismantling something one statement at a time. Marcus's "it's nothing" is actually an 11-year sentence with $6,100 in fees stapled to it. You don't have the credit for a 0% balance transfer yet. So instead, you build a real number. $5,240 divided by 15 months is $349 a month. That's not comfortable. That's canceling 3 subscriptions, that's brown bagging lunch, that's skipping your cousin's bachelor weekend in Nashville you were already dreading paying for. But 15 months at that pace costs around $980 in interest instead of $6,100. You write the number on a sticky note and put it on your monitor. Not as motivation, just as a fact you don't want to lose again. You could close the laptop right now and let the minimum keep doing what it's been doing. Nobody would know. Instead, you set the auto pay. $349, starting Friday. You watch the confirmation load with something closer to dread than relief. That's real money leaving a paycheck that was already tight. Which is exactly why the cash you haven't saved yet is about to matter more than it ever has. Because in 2 weeks, this exact card is going to get tested by something you can't auto-pay your way out of. 2 weeks into the new auto-pay, your Corolla answers a question you didn't ask. The check engine light stops blinking and just stays on. 2 days later, it won't start in the parking lot at 6:10 p.m. Lot half empty, sky going that flat orange it gets in early November. The tow driver, a guy named Deshaun, who tells you unprompted he's been doing this 9 years, drops the car at a shop off Route 4. Diagnosis the next morning. Starter motor, plus a battery that was already on its last month. $540 due before they release the car. You have $290 in savings. You had $290 3 weeks ago, too, before every spare dollar started going to the card, and you haven't added a cent since. The card felt more urgent. Sitting in the waiting room with a Keurig hissing in the corner, you finally do math you should have done a month ago. $540 minus $290 is $250 you don't have. The nearest source of that money is the same card you've spent 3 weeks trying to shrink. This is the moment it stops being theoretical. All that talk about interest rates was true, but it was a number on a screen you could close. This is a car that won't start and a shop that wants cash by 5. This is the difference between an inconvenience and an emergency. And the only thing separating those two words is whether the money already exists somewhere with your name on it. You put the $250 on the card. It's the only option in the room. And watching that swipe go through, you understand it, not from an article, from the actual feeling in your chest. 6 months of expenses was never a savings goal. It's a wall. It was supposed to stand between you and this exact swipe. It wasn't built yet. Your coworker Aisha, who runs inventory 2 aisles over, mentioned once she keeps 5 months of expenses in a high-yield account she never touches. Boring on purpose, she called it. You'd nodded politely. Walking out of the shop now with a fixed starter and a heavier card balance, it doesn't sound boring anymore. It sounds like the difference between a bad Tuesday and a bad year. Your monthly expenses, rent, insurance, groceries, gas, land around $1,950. 6 months of that is $11,700. A number so far from your $290 it should feel impossible. For a second it does. But you're not building it this week. You're building the first $75 of it Friday. You open a separate account that night and move the money before you can talk yourself out of it. Not the wall yet, the first brick. Underneath all of it is a quieter question. Not what happens when the car breaks, but what happens to your worth per hour when nothing breaks at all. That question doesn't wait long to answer itself. Monday morning, your supervisor, Glenn, pulls you into the back office and tells you, almost apologetically, that this year's raise is 2.5%, same as last year. $54,000 becomes $55,350. You do the math before you're back at your station. After taxes, that's about $85 extra a month, less than what's now leaving your account for the card. You sit with your 2 monitors, one slightly dimmer than the other, and something Aisha said weeks ago comes back to you. She'd mentioned, almost in passing, that she does freelance inventory audits for 2 small e-commerce shops on weekends, same spreadsheet skills she uses all day, just aimed somewhere Glenn doesn't control. It's not extra work, she said. It's the same work, just not capped by what Glenn decides I'm worth. That sentence sits with you longer than the raise did. Your salary has a ceiling built into it, set by someone in a budget meeting you'll never sit in. But the actual skill, reading inventory data fast, catching discrepancies, writing clean reports. Doesn't have Glenn's ceiling on it. It only has whatever ceiling you put on it yourself. That night, you build a profile on a freelance platform, list the 2 systems you know cold, and forget about it for 5 days until a message comes through from a small online retailer in Denver. 12 hours a week, $24 an hour, fully remote, evenings. It's not huge. 12 hours at $24 comes to a few $100s every 2 weeks, done in the 90 minutes after dinner you used to spend scrolling. But it's money with no ceiling attached, no Glenn, no 2.5%. You also notice something else. You're faster on the freelance work than at your actual job because nobody's watching a clock, only the work getting done well. Your laptop screen is too small for the spreadsheets, though, so you buy a refurbished 27-inch monitor for $175, hesitating 2 days first. It's not a treat. It's the thing that makes the extra income sustainable without wrecking your eyes by 10 p.m. By month's end, between the raise and the freelance work, you've added about $310 to what used to be just a paycheck. And for the first time, that number came from something Glenn never touched. Which raises a very different question. Whether the safest place to put that extra money is even the safe option at all. The message from Denver turns into a real offer 5 weeks later. Not more freelance hours. A full role at a startup called Ledgerline. 4 people. Building software to automate the exact audits you've been doing by hand. The founder, a former ops manager named Theodora, offers $49,000, a pay cut, plus 0.6% equity, vesting over 4 years. You bring the offer to Aisha at lunch, sliding your phone across the table like it might bite you. That's a pay cut, she says. The same thing that's kept you up since Tuesday. Theodora mentions, almost offhand, that her own former manager left a stable job 7 years ago for something almost exactly like this. Last year, that company sold. He walked away with just under $3.2 million and bought a place outside Boulder. The kind of listing you scroll past on Zillow at midnight without meaning to. You don't know if Ledgerline becomes that. Nobody does. That's the entire point. An asymmetric bet isn't a guess dressed up as confidence. It's a trade where you can name the downside in advance. Here, the downside is $6,350 a year in lost salary. The exact gap between what you make now and what Theodora's offering for 4 years if it never vests into anything. That's a number you can survive. It's not the whole Jeep payment Priya's still carrying. It's not the starter motor emergency. It's a bruise, not a break. The upside has no ceiling because equity doesn't work like a paycheck. Your 2.5% raise from Glenn was capped the moment it was announced. Theodora's 0.6% is capped by nothing except how big Ledgerline gets. And if it gets anywhere near what her old company did, 0.6% of $3.2 million changes which decade you retire in. You run a different kind of math that night, one you've never done before. 25 times your annual expenses invested is the number where compound growth alone can carry you the rest of the way without another dollar from you. Aisha once called it coast, half joking, the way people joke about things they actually want. At $1,950 a month in expenses, that number is roughly $585,000. You're nowhere near it, but for the first time you can see the shape of a path where equity, not another 2.5% raise, closes that gap in years instead of decades. You think about the Corolla, the starter motor, the $349 still leaving your account every month for the card. None of that disappears if you take this job. The bet doesn't erase the ground you're standing on. It just changes what you're standing on it for. You type the acceptance email to Theodora at 11:52 p.m., read it twice, and hit send before you can talk yourself back into safety. Not because you're certain, because you finally understand certainty was never actually available to you. Not in the safe job either. Glenn's ceiling was never guaranteed to hold for 10 years. It just felt that way because nothing had tested it yet. 4 months into Ledgerline, you're in the passenger seat of Theodora's pickup, driving back from a client meeting in Fort Collins when her phone lights up on the dash. Her mother. She lets it go to voicemail, then exhales in a way that says more than the call would have. She's turning 66 in the spring, Theodora says, not really to you. I still don't know where the paperwork is. You don't say anything at first because you're thinking about your own dad. 64, still working, still the guy who changes his own oil and won't talk about money with anyone. Somewhere on Route 287, you realize you don't know where his paperwork is either. You don't know if he even has a will. That night, you open your laptop, not to check the freelance dashboard or the card autopay, but something you've never needed to look at before. Term life insurance quotes. Not because anything happened, because for the first time, something depends on you existing. Your mom, still years from her own retirement, is quietly counting on you never needing her help, and maybe one day being able to offer some back. Between Ledgerline and what's left of the freelance work, you're making around $56,000. The number every insurance site keeps repeating is 10 to 12 times your income. Somewhere between $560,000 and $670,000 in coverage. A 20-year term policy, healthy non-smoker, runs about $24 a month, less than the monitor cost you once. You sit with that for a second. $24 a month is the price of making sure a bad day doesn't become a second tragedy for someone who loves you. You think about Theodora's mother and the paperwork nobody's found, and open a new tab. A basic will through an online service runs under $180 one afternoon answering questions about who gets what, who decides if you can't. You don't have much yet. No house, no lake property, none of that. But you have a 401k, a small brokerage account slowly filling with vesting equity, and a Corolla that's finally, mercifully running clean. Somebody should know what happens to all of it. The harder conversation is the one Theodora almost had on the highway. You call your dad that Sunday. Not about money exactly. Circling it, the way these calls always start. He deflects twice. The third time you just ask, "Where's the paperwork? Is there a will? Who do I call if something happens?" He goes quiet for a second, then tells you it's in the fireproof box in the garage. Something in his voice sounds relieved you asked before he had to bring it up himself. You hang up and sit at your kitchen table, the new monitor dark, the street outside doing whatever it does on a Sunday night. Nothing about that call felt like winning. It felt like maintenance, the unglamorous kind nobody posts about. But maintenance is what keeps everything else standing once it's built. Somewhere between the starter motor, the equity, and the fireproof box in your dad's garage, you stopped being the version of you scrolling a banking app at your desk. Not because the numbers got easy, because you finally know which ones are worth carrying. You still check your balance most mornings, but you're not bracing for it anymore. The dread used to arrive before the app even loaded. Now it's just a habit, the way Theodora checks the weather before a drive. The Corolla still ticks a little on cold mornings. The equity still hasn't vested. Next Tuesday will still ask something of you that Monday didn't finish paying for. But you're not doing the math to survive it anymore. You're doing it because you finally know what you're protecting. And some nights, walking past the kitchen table where the laptop sits closed, you catch yourself wondering what your dad never asked himself until you finally did.